Now, in the New Age philosophies, there's a lot of people saying, we often hear communication from the Pleideians or, something like that. These, unfortunately, are not anything to do with this. They are people who are up to the 6th dimension in this probationary area, who believe themselves now to be people experiencing other things. So they have yet to progress beyond that point of what surrounds the multidimensional space around our Earth. They live on other planets, physical planets, through which the Earth is connected through this space, this dimensional space. But they believe themselves to be, and they of course then believe themselves to be, people who live on these planets, but the reality is they are actually spirits who have come from this planet. And it's interesting when you start talking with them about that. There's initially a period of intellectual denial that they go through with you, like they don't want to discuss with you their history. And then after a while, they start being drawn into a conversation about their history, and then they finish up admitting that they used to live on this earth, actually. And then when you talk to them about what they're experiencing, they've been in the spirit world many hundreds and sometimes thousands of years, but they've not progressed beyond this point because they have yet to receive God's love. And this is the same problem around many Earths in the universe. There are many people who have yet to progress beyond that point because they don't want to connect with God and connect with God's love. Does that make sense? Yeah? Yep. So do you understand the general structure of what's going on? It's very difficult to describe multidimensional space on a three-dimensional drawing, but if you can understand that these multidimensional spaces are actually larger than the physical space they are associated with, and they are in a completely different dimension in the sense that each dimension is separated from each other by what you would call, or what we call in the spirit world, an interstellar boundary, which is usually a boundary of love, which is hundreds of light years across, which when you're a spirit, you can travel across rapidly. You can travel at speeds faster than the speed of light, and so therefore you can travel across these boundaries instantaneously if you have a certain condition of love in your soul. You can only travel those boundaries. So these spirits here are in the 6th dimension. Each one of these boundaries are still separated by interstellar boundaries, which are gradients in love. And this is where most scientists they don't want to have the love association with all of this, unfortunately. And so therefore they finish up stopping their progress until they understand that the boundaries are actually love-based boundaries. But the reality is that each boundary is a boundary of love that is separated by distance, often hundreds of light years in terms of distance, if we had to physically transfer through those distances. But because we're in a condition of love where you can make those shifts instantly, you can shift between one and the other boundary. So if I've progressed to the 6th dimension of the spirit of this dimensional existence that surrounds this Earth and many of the other physical Earths in this particular, or many of the other physical planets in this particular environment, then what happens is that I can only go down from there and visit the other locations that are in a lower condition than myself. If I attempt to go higher, I will not be able to break the next boundary, and therefore I am unable to move into the next boundary. And it requires me developing in love in a certain direction that would enable me to make that transition. So what we call, in answer to the rest of the question, what we call, beings from outer space, shall we label them all like that? There are living forms of life in other areas of the physical universe. These people at the moment, the ones who are highly developed, which have a soul attached to them, in the same way that we have a soul attached to us, these ones are unable to actually communicate with us, just as we are unable to communicate with them at the moment through the physical space, for the reason that they're of the same development technologically as we currently are. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And the primary reason is because of the amount of love that goes through the universe is limited by God at a certain level at any one point in time that pervades the entire universe. And it's the amount of love that dictates the development. And so because we're all dictated by the same amount of love, then we're all going to have a similar development. As these physical, there is the potential in the future that we could raise our condition of love while we still live on Earth to this union condition. In other words, that we can get to the point where we reach this union condition while on Earth. Now, if that happens, and when that happens, we will then be able to communicate with these other Earths. Does that make sense? And we will even be able to transport ourselves from one of those Earths to another Earth physically. So once that happens, the whole universe will become a lot smaller, just like our world became smaller when they invented flying. Yep. And when that happens, obviously we'll be able to communicate with them before we go through the process of going through the existence of our spirit body. In other words, going through our spirit life. The way God designed it originally is that we have the potential to reach a soul union condition while we still exist in a physical form, and therefore we have the potential in this condition to communicate with other beings who are also in a soul union condition in a different location of the universe, or of a different universe even. Yep. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now, bear in mind that everything man has discovered so far has a relationship to these things. So, for example, the dark matter, dark energy and dark flow theories that man has invented to explain certain phenomena that they measure all relate to this area from the first dimensional existence above the earth, above the physical dimension, to the union condition. And these forms of energy are constantly changing as a result. And in fact, what they're finding is that there is a general flow of energy from the physical universe to these other dark matter universes. And that is actually what is occurring, because the reality is more and more people are entering the spirit world and therefore entering the multi-dimensional spaces that exist outside of the physical universe. And as a result of that, there has to be matter flowing into these particular dimensional spaces for them to survive and to sustain life. And so that is a continuously occurring thing.